One of the challenges of being an author is avoiding the fraudsters and scam artists who try and take advantage as the author attempts to promote and sell their books. I've fallen foul of just such a scam. Here's my story. I commissioned the Hollywood producer Adam Cushman, owner of the Los Angeles-based company Film 14, to produce an audiobook of my recent release, The Babel Apocalypse. The novel imagines a dystopian future in which language is no longer learned but streamed to neural implants. Adam Cushman and Film 14, based on web presence and ostensible endorsements, appeared to be a legitimate live-action book trailer and audiobook production company. Both Cushman and Film 14 also have a legitimate company registration with the California Secretary of State. Public records show the company is registered at the following address: 2122 Vista Del Mar Avenue, Apartment 36, LA, California 90068. Moreover, Cushman seemed well connected. After sending me some samples of voice actors, he was able to procure the services of James Duval, the Hollywood actor best known for playing Frank the Rabbit in the movie Donnie Darko. The production fee for the audiobook was $5,500, with a further $5,000 for the voice actor, making $10,500 in total. I was asked to pay half up front, meaning $5,250. The first sign of trouble was that Cushman couldn't provide a proper contract. He sent me a standard contract to film a live-action book trailer. Obviously, that wasn't acceptable for an audiobook, so I drafted a bespoke contract for an audiobook, which Cushman was happy to sign. The key requirements of the contract were as follows. The audiobook will be recorded in an industry-standard sound studio venue that adheres to all technical requirements and specifications stipulated by ACX, the parent company of Audible, to ensure that the audiobook be accepted for sale on that and similar audiobook retail platforms. And the audiobook must represent a faithful narrated rendition of the print EPUB version of the book. 1 week after the contract was signed and the initial $5,250 was paid, Cushman sent me audio samples of the opening titles, prologue and chapter 1, narration of the first few paragraphs, so that I could provide input into the voice acting style. It was immediately clear from these short samples there were serious problems. For one thing, the acoustic quality was poor. There were continuous pops on the P and B plosive sounds. Microphone pops from these stop consonants sound terrible in every audio situation, with the possible exception of beatboxing. This signaled that a low-quality microphone setup was being used and without a pop filter on the microphone, which is the absolutely minimum requirement in any recording setup. This clearly was not the ACX quality industry standard sound studio I had been promised. Second, despite having prepared a 16-page pronunciation guide, which was shared with the voice actor, it was clear that this had not been fully consulted. The pronunciation of names was just plain wrong. Third, the actor frequently stumbled over words, didn't seem to know how to pronounce basic words, and even missed words, parts of sentences, or added in words and phrases not in the text. Finally, across the short audio samples, there were marked differences in pacing, energy, and performance by the voice actor. One sample was well paced, while another was mumbled, too fast, and lacked energy. I began to suspect that the actor was working alone, without any supervision or checking from the producer to ensure that the narration was a faithful rendition of the text. It was clear from the erratic changes in tempo and energy across the short samples that the voice actor had little or no experience of audiobook narration, which is actually a very demanding skill to master. I complained about these issues and sent through an exhaustive listing of omissions. I was promised that the acoustic problems would be corrected in editing and that problematic samples would be re-recorded and omissions fixed. 2 weeks later, I received the mastered and edited acoustic quality of the so-called master files was clearly subpar, and the same omissions were still apparent. For instance, here is a representative audio excerpt narrated by James Duval from the supposedly master version of the prologue. As you listen to the excerpt, you can hear the popping on the word initial P sounds in the words person, palace, and private. They all pop because a cheap microphone was used without a pop filter. This is a no-go for an audiobook, and certainly not for a premium service where I was paying a higher rate to obtain a notable voice actor. Also, you can hear and see that an entire phrase has been omitted by the voice actor. The portion highlighted in yellow from the text is skipped in the narration.
Ebba knew, and she knew that her losses were more than any ordinary person could bear. What sustained the blackness of her sorrow was vengeance. Vengeance past, and vengeance yet to be dealt. Ebba nurtured it in the dark palace of her mind, the innermost, most private mental shrine where she kept the one list, the list of lists.
After receiving the master-edited audio files of the prologue and chapter 1, I confronted Cushman with my suspicions that the actor was being left unsupervised and that no sound studio was in fact being used. I suspected that the actor was being left to his own devices. Clearly a low-quality microphone was being used. And given that the actor had been working on this daily for 3 weeks to produce just the first 2 chapters, according to emails from Cushman, it was more than likely the actor was simply recording at home. After all, an industry standard sound studio is expensive to hire, and the entire process should have been recorded over a period of just a few days to avoid studio rental costs running into the thousands of dollars. To my further shock, rather than an immediate reply, Cushman removed the master files from the shared online portal. That I found suspicious. He then later replied by email as follows. There's been no breach or grift. Our recording environment is up to ACX standards and is not being conducted in the actor's bedroom. This was hardly a reassuring response. More reassuring would have been the name and address of the sound studio and the details of the sound engineer and production team, rather than merely stating that the studio was not in fact the actor's bedroom. As I had already downloaded the master files before Cushman deleted them, I commissioned an ACX Audio Lab analysis from Audible to see whether they passed muster. The Audio Lab report confirmed my suspicion. They failed to meet ACX audio standards, which meant they were useless. I wouldn't be able to use the audio files even if they had been a faithful rendition of the text, which they obviously weren't. The contract with Cushman is governed by Californian state law. This states that a contract is null and void if the service provider repudiates the contract, which amounts to an anticipatory breach. In plain English, this means that as Cushman was contracted to use an ACX quality setup, but did not provide ACX quality, and then lied about this, he had signalled his intention to breach the terms of the contract. This rendered the contract null and void under Californian state law. Accordingly, I informed Cushman I was pulling the plug and requested a full refund. Cushman refused a full refund of $5,250, insisting on keeping a cancellation fee of $500 and retaining a further $750 for what he called assemblage time. This meant he was offering a refund of just $4,000. I informed Cushman that unless he refunded the full amount, which I was entitled to, I would feel at liberty to post a consumer review and comment on social media to warn others about my experience with him. The next day, I received an aggressive letter from his lawyer stipulating I would not receive a full refund, only the $4,000 I'd already been offered, and only if I signed a non-disclosure agreement. Needless to say, I refused to comply. I was entitled to my money back, which was even written into the terms of the contract in the event I cancelled. And describing my experiences with the service providers protected under Californian consumer law and by my First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. Cushman's lawyer then proceeded to stalk me online and sent a harassing letter to a YouTuber who interviewed me about the scandal. Cushman's lawyer threatened the YouTuber with legal action if they posted an interview with me. To date, I have not received my money back from Cushman. I have reported the matter to the FBI's online consumer fraud team, who are investigating Cushman and Film 14, and Cushman now has a complaint on file against him with the California state attorney. Needless to say, this has been a fraught and traumatic experience where I have lost over $5,000 of my money. Rather than reimbursing me, Cushman used the money to pay an unscrupulous lawyer to harass me and others in order to keep as much of the money as he could, despite having no intention of delivering a quality product. He, the actor James Duval, as well as his lawyer Dustin Sloan of Raskin Gorman Anderson Law, should be ashamed of themselves. My advice is to avoid Film 14 and Adam Cushman at all costs. You can support me by checking out the Babel Apocalypse. The book received a rare Kirkus star, which praised the book as a perfect fusion of SF thriller and mystery, smart speculative fiction at its very best. And an audiobook of the Babel Apocalypse will be coming in due course, this time produced by a reputable audiobook provider.